Hi, everyone. Welcome to this edition of the Michael and Rusty Show. I'm Russell Harrison. Hi, Michael.
Hey, Uncle Russ.
So today we're going to focus on the CFL, particularly the situation in Hamilton with the dismissal of Tommy Condell as the offensive coordinator. Michael, could you give your comments on what's happened?
Well, earlier this week, Tommy Condell was relieved of his duties as the offensive coordinator of the Tiger Cats, in case many of you don't know. Condell left the organization after three, I believe, 2.5 seasons with the club in his second tenure. Because remember, he had the first tenure, he lasted 3 full seasons as OC. So in a Ken Austin era. My thoughts is it's kind of mixed feelings because it's more to do with the situation evolving with the team injury wise and not having to have a full healthy slate of players playing under Condell. So that's the mix. That's the one part of the mix up I understand, and the same went from the first tenure as well, when he was for a lot of injuries, especially the coaching of, the quarterbacks from Henry Burris, and then you deal with Zach Caleros and his injuries, and they had Jeremiah Masoli and don't forget about Matthews and Harris down in 2015, I believe. After the closes, I believe it was his ACL. He had to manage that, and also, like I mentioned, about the injuries as well in his first tenure. And he went on to win the Grey Cup with the Argonauts in 2017 after taking a year off. And then he came back after 2 seasons with the Double Blue, I believe, and came back in 2019. Initially was going to be the receivers coach, but after June Jones left for Houston in the XFL, the Tommy Condell was promoted to offensive coordinator just before training camp in that deal. And we all know what happened with Jeremiah Masoli went down and Dane Evans took over, and the Cats had their best regular season in franchise history at 15-3. And there were praises of Condell, but also Condell had issues with play calling. Excuse the noise, fellas, because my dog is barking in the background upstairs. So my apologies. But Condell was a very amiable play caller since the 2021 season, despite the fact that you had good balance of quarterbacks, both Evans and Soli. Then the last season and a half, it has been come to a point that he's starting to overstay his welcome with Hamilton, because the offensive numbers were not really good. And you look at Dan Evans last year, he was not really good until the last several weeks of the season. Like the second half, primarily, he turned it on. But overall, his numbers were not as impressive. So yeah, it's a mixed reality. But like I just said, I think he overstayed his welcome the last season and a half. But we wish Condell nothing but the best, and I think he will get a job as a coordinator, or let alone a coach in the CFL, even in the States.
Yeah, I agree in general with everything you've said. I think no doubt he is one of the better offensive coordinators in the league. but the team is suffering with injuries. I mean, you lose your top two quarterbacks in Levi Mitchell and Matthew Schultz. It definitely affects the possibility of your team doing well statistically. I believe they're seventh right now in total yardage and eighth in scoring. So, there were pressures in competing, as well as you have the replacement now with Scott Milanovich going from basically an offensive quality control role to actually being the play caller. What do you think of his ascension to the play calling duties?
With his experience of coaching back in his days in Toronto, and I think he was in Montreal, not mistaken.
I believe so at one point, yes.
Yeah, but he's a very good quarterback minded coach. He had good offenses in Toronto when Ricky Ray was there, with Chad Owens at the peak, even though he was like as kind of ascending down the peak, but he was still a very serviceable receiver. And yeah, Milanovich has had a really good CFL resume, and then he went to the NFL for several years, and most recently, I believe he was in Indianapolis, trying to get
and before that, Jacksonville.
In Jacksonville, yeah, and trying to get I believe at the time was Matt Ryan and Carson Wentz into back to their respectability, but it didn't quite fail out. But still, he's a very good football mind, and I don't see any issue with the way things will be changing. And given the fact that this is a very perfect time with the with the Tiger Cats being in the bye week this week, it's gonna get some time just to get coordinated, accustomed to the specifics of what Scott Milanovich is going to do with Hamilton.
I'm sure that he will be installing some of his own plays as well. He has extensive experience as a offensive coordinator as well as a head coach, so I see it as a positive. I mean, Steinauer and Milanovich have a rapport going way back with Toronto, and I think that there may be some possibility of Steinauer going up to the the president's suite in Hamilton full time at some point. So Milanovich is quite possibly the next head coach, or at least should be considered as such, if Orlando decides to do that. But I do feel that we aren't in a situation where we have to panic as Tiger Cat fans, because Milanovich has a lot of experience in that regard. And I do agree with what you said about Condell possibly being a head coaching candidate elsewhere. The challenge is that there is now basically a salary cap for administration in the CFL. Mm-hmm. And already, there's been lots of talk about Chris Jones's status going forward as the de facto guru in Edmonton, having the head coaching and general managing duties right now, that if they do replace him as head coach, that they may in fact be facing a salary cap crunch in the administrative side. So Condell is in line for a future job in Canada going forward, but he may have to wait a bit.
If I'm not mistaken, if I may address one thing, is I remember last year when when there was an opening as head coach, like this last off season, and ultimately it was won over by Bob Dice.
Yeah.
If I may recall, I think Tommy Condell was in consideration for the job.
Definitely.
So yeah, that's like I mentioned. I think he will be a good coach somewhere in the CFL
I don't know. I don't know how Ottawa's situation is, but I would assume that they're going to give Bob Dice time as a new coach to settle in. But Condell does have ties with the Ottawa administration because many of them are related to the Terror Cats at one point. Mm-hmm. So we'll see what happens with that. What do you think of the league situation overall at this point in the season?
As regarding Tiger Cats, or
well, regarding the league, you can address the Terror Cats first off.
Well, going to last week, I found it very interesting on social media of the CFL, stating that if I believe if Hamilton would have won and Ottawa would have won, they would have been on course to be going in the crossover from east to the west. Given the fact the Eastern Division, for the first time in a very long time, it seems like forever. Since I've been seeing the CFL for 25 years or so, since I was 9 years old. That our East Division outplayed, well, let's just say outwin the Western Division at this point for the first time in a decade or so, and that's a very interesting stat, given the fact that the previous years we have been accustomed to have the Eastern teams getting got blown out or been misplayed by the Western Bolts.
This has never happened before under the crossover rule. There's never been a Western crossover where Eastern teams have gone into the Western bracket. I do remember when the U.S. expansion happened, that there was a Northern Division. And I think it was 94. I could be wrong. But in 1994, I believe, Hamilton did play in Calgary for a playoff game as part of the Northern Division bracket. So that's the last time that an Eastern team, to my knowledge, has played in the West for a CFL playoff. But it is interesting because Calgary's not doing particularly well. We know that the Elks are having all sorts of trouble. So there is a possible fourth spot. If you look at the standings, where an Eastern team is slotting in right with Calgary, the crossover rule basically is that a team that crosses over does have to have more points than their counterpart in that division, because the teams that are in place in each division, they get the first nod if they are tied with the crossover team. It eliminates a crossover in effect because you have to have more points than the team that you're beating in the opposing division. So we'll see what happens with that for sure. Yeah. The story that I'm interested in, just because I guess I'm into Schadenfreude, is the whole thing about the Elks not winning a home game in, what is it now, 22 or 23 games?
I'd say 22.
Yeah, they're playing the Blue Bombers tonight. Well, we're taping this show on Thursday night, August 10th. So maybe you can talk about the elk situation from your viewpoint.
Well, it's a record, well, then on the streak that you do not want to be on the receiving end. There has been uh, no worse streak on a home soil on a consecutive game basis than what the Edmonton Elks accomplished. I think it was last week, if I'm not mistaken.
2 weeks ago.
Edmonton, fun?
I think it was 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, I think it was against BC, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
The Edmonton Elks just just moved past, I believe, with the St. Louis Browns.
Yes, baseball.
The baseball, which coincidentally the following year they went to Baltimore, become the Baltimore Orioles, I believe. I may be off a little bit, but I'm pretty sure it was not too long after the streak. But yeah, just passing those St. Louis Browns, which is no longer a active team in Major League Baseball, and given the fact that Edmonton Elks, who was once had by way of lineage one of the most successful and respected franchises in all of Canadian football, going in a crap hole like that right now, it's really rough to see for the fans. And I commend the ownership for trying to, I think it's Victor Chewy. I think that's the owner. I apologize for mispronunciation, but he's trying to promote whichever way he can. Just like the new owner of the BC Lions, he's doing a great job with the promotion as well. So
they have a guaranteed win
wise,
night tonight, I think.
Wow. So yeah,
I think there is a promotion for a guaranteed win, perhaps tonight. And so, like, there'll be a future ticket if they lose. So
yeah, I think that it could be a good chance, because given what's going on in Winnipeg, they're still an efficient team, and the way that Edmonton is playing, Trey Ford is starting at quarterback tonight, so it is going to be a very interesting challenge for the Elks, and be hoping for the better for the Elks fans. They have deserved it, deserve to be happy. They deserve to have a winning franchise. But unfortunately, things going on right now is they're playing like, I don't know, my old high school teams,
yes.
Football teams. Being my
That's
uncle,
Rowell McNabb, which I went to. Yeah.
Yeah, we both went to, but good 20 years apart, I believe. Yeah, I remember those teams. With all due respect, yeah, the Edmonton Elks could probably been lose to the Minneapolis. That's a very like a low bar for a franchise that, like I said, once respected and revered across.
They've been the most successful franchise in my lifetime.
Yeah.
I think if you just go by winning percentage, playoff appearances at the Grey Cup, I mean, they have lost a number of them since their dynasty in the 80s, but they've always been a very successful team. They play in the largest stadium by capacity in the CFL. Historically, they've had great crowds. And it's a terrible streak. It's a terrible run because, I mean, we've experienced the early 2000s collapse of the Terracats, and I thought that was the nadir for a CFL team that I could remember. And now you have what we're seeing in Edmonton. Winnipeg obviously had a huge victory last week against BC. They're on top of the West. What do you think of the situation in the West overall? Do you see Winnipeg just running away with it?
If they find a second deal, that I think that will be the Winnipeg will be the kings of the West Division once again. But keep an eye on BC as well with the Vernon Adams situation. I don't know how long they have left. I don't forgot to read the notes about him. How many games did he left the injury reserve? I think he's in 6 games.
Yeah.
So
he might come off it early,
mm-hmm.
but I heard it was about a month at the absolute minimum when it happened. So, Dane Evans, he had a tough time last week. No doubt. I mean, I think Winnipeg was just loaded for bear for sure. Overall, there have been a tremendous amount of injuries at the quarterback position. I think all teams have had to really prepare for big changes. Even Cody Fajardo of Montreal is not guaranteed to be playing this week. Who do you see as being the best young quarterback on the radar right now in the league that is an established player, let's say?
Last
I
season,
I like Trey Ford.
Yeah.
I throughout this losing streak, I've always wondered why he was not put back in after. I believe he was injured last year and lost his spot. But I've always seen him as a double threat guy. He's someone that could develop into quite the player. I think Edmonton does have to give him a shot for a while because obviously nothing else has worked. But who do you see, if anyone, that impresses you?
Clump from Ottawa.
Yeah.
That's all I can think of. Clump has had some kind of gene that there's no quit mentality. He most of his starts, if not all his starts, he came within a couple of points short, at least a couple of points short in the losing end. And the comebacks, especially the one against Winnipeg, they came all the way back within 5 minutes left in the regulation and forced overtime. And that clump big run to seal the game.
He's always been one of those guys that the knock against him coming into the league was that he wasn't always the most accurate guy. But that's something that can obviously be worked on and improved. Jeremiah Mazzoli would be an equivalent guy from his resume when he was at Oregon coming into the league. He improved his accuracy. And I think that Cruen has tremendous running skills. He's more of a scrambler than anything else. He's not the type of guy who's just going to take off, in designs plays. But he knows how to pick his spots, and I think he's got a lot of potential as well. From what I was talking about with Trey Ford, I think that as things develop with Ottawa, he's going to have an opportunity to really grow as a quarterback.
You got the trade deadline coming up very soon too, and it should be an interesting time in the next few weeks, the next month or so, until the trade deadline. Because I think the deadline is not too long after Labor Day. I could be wrong. I think it could be closer to October or something.
Yeah, I think it's towards the end of September. I'll have to look into that as well. But I think that it is coming up, and obviously teams are going to have to scramble a bit.
Yeah.
We do have the first cuts happening in NFL training camps. So that's an opportunity. It's not like it used to be in the 70s and 80s where teams could simply just wait for the airlift of players. With the salary cap, it does keep those kinds of additions down, but definitely teams are going to have to look for additional depth offensively in particular. So it'll be interesting to see.
Mhm.
What team do you think has disappointed the most, other than Edmonton, obviously? But any team particularly the West, that you thought would be better than they are?
I don't think it's at the fault of Trevor Harris, but I think Saskatchewan
Yeah.
could be in a conversation. You could say the same thing about Calgary. Even though they had a huge win recently, they're not as efficient as we all accustomed to be in the years, especially during the Willoughby Mitchell era. And even it was before that with Dickinson and Garcia and Flutie before, and that the dominance of Calgary is not as strong now.
Jake
But
Muir is disappointed.
Yeah, but I think Saskatchewan is just as disappointing because you have the expectations when Trevor Harris came to town, and you got a good receiving core, and it's just the team itself has not been as good as advertised. They're battling, as we discussed, the crossover for a little bit earlier in this episode. I don't see at this point, if unless Hamilton does make a strong push, and Ottawa will make a push as well. Whoever finishes last in the East will likely will cross over into the West and probably top of Saskatchewan or Calgary, because we all know Edmonton is dead in the water literally as of right now. But I just they need to change things up, especially in the trade deadline. Saskatchewan and probably Calgary just trying to remain themselves competitive and to avoid a crossover, because the third place team in the West Division, they have less points than the Eastern Division, or vice versa, that we've seen in the past. You could pretty well see, given the play of Ottawa, we could ultimately see Ottawa go on the West, or even Hamilton play on the West. There's still lots of time, but yeah, Saskatchewan and Calgary are definitely the two most disappointing teams. I thought that they're going to be a little bit more competitive, but they have been sluggish at best. But now I fall in Saskatchewan for Trevor Harris, but it's just they're trending waters right now. But
they are, because obviously it's not dissimilar to what the Tar-Cats are doing, waiting on Bo Levi Mitchell to mend from his leg injury. Trevor Harris is supposed to come back at some point later in the season. I think that they definitely have to bank on Mason Fine having more consistency. He's had his moments, but as a young quarterback, I mean, there are pressures going into any season, and I think he's feeling it right now. A lot of anticipation that they were going to, retool and possibly make a run for, possibly second in the division, and it just hasn't materialized as they would hope right now. And I think that they are catchable, and I definitely think that Ottawa has played better than Saskatchewan and Calgary in terms of their peak play this year. So it'll be interesting to see how that shapes up. I definitely think that Ottawa is, not just a crossover candidate in the West, but they could overtake Hamilton. So, it'll be interesting to see what shakes down with those races. Any other comments on what you've seen with the league?
Well, Darrell Walker has been released. A day from Saskatchewan, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Yeah, after only one game. I think it'll be unfair to say the idea for when it's just I think he has injury issues back in the last couple of seasons or so. But when healthy, he's an all-pro level receiver. And I haven't looked on the chats of the Tiger Cats chats on Facebook, or even on social media as a whole. I have not been gone to a CFL.ca forums in a long time. But I'm just saying that anytime there's a big name player being released or on the trade block and stuff, it's a common normality that Tiger Cat fans, and same goes for all the CFL teams in particular. All the fan bases will want this guy, but you gotta acknowledge the fact that about the salary cap, and given the fact that Hamilton is not in dire need for receiving core right now. The receiving core has been at average at best so far this season. They had a lot of key drops from last week in Montreal against Montreal.
And they're losing a lot of the 50-50 balls.
Yeah.
I mean, that to me, like Duke Williams did not have a good game last week. And he
dropped by Keandre Smith in the third quarter, which could have been a big
he has to really pick it up, in my opinion, because he's a guy that can be an elite receiver. He's shown in the past that he has that capability.
And quietly, he has had a productive season so far, but it's just like the more misses than hits at times.
Yeah, and I mean, they need to have a consistent possession receiver.
The one other thing I want, sorry, just one quick note I want to touch base since we're talking about Keandre Smith from the Tiger Cats.
Yeah.
Apparently, I and several of my friends. One of my friends who's sitting at Tim Hortons Field. They live just not far from the stadium.
Right.
I'm not going to name them, but there was an incident happened on the section 109, which was one section the closest to the scoreboard on the west end.
Okay.
Like midway of the person in question, sits with her parents, with her parent and stuff, and we were good friends for a decade or so. But this person is a friend of Keandre Smith, and there has been a lot of chatter during the game last week, unbeknownst to me, because I was sitting at the old Cold Light patio, and I was briefed on after the game that said there was people harassing this lady who is a friend of Keandre Smith, and about the drops, and it's just because of her, the drops. It's like it's totally childish and nonsense, yes. and it should not be allowed because this is borderline harassment, and it's not. It's not the right place. It's like, yes, you're a friend of the player, and I know those folks. They know the past and present Tiger Cats players that they get involved, and not too much, not too personally, but they're friends with several current and former players who play for the Ticats and still play in the CFL.
Yeah.
It's just, it is beyond me to even suggest that have a harassment, a person getting harassed because of one of their player being not very effective on the field, and you're blaming on them, even though they have nothing to do with it. So
Fans have the right to criticize
yeah,
during the game through booing, voicing their displeasure, whatever. But it crosses the line when you start to see this kind of behavior against friends of players or family members of players who are at the games. That's completely unacceptable. And I've told you, and I've spoken about this in earlier podcasts, the whole thing with Tom Clements in the 1980s, where fans were actually, being hateful against him. There was vandalism, I believe, against his home. Complete, bull crap, unacceptable, and there's no place for it. And it just simply leaves a bad reputation for the
yeah,
organization and the city for potential players in the future who might want to come to Hamilton but are dissuaded from doing so. So I am shocked by what you've said, and it's, again, I mean, people have the right to be frustrated. I mean, it has not been the kind of season that people have wanted, because obviously we're hosting the Grey Cup in November in Hamilton, and there's disappointment at the current situation. But that frustration is that has to be absorbed by the fan base, understanding the situation with injuries. There is now flux with the offensive coaching staff. These are things that happen. I'm not making excuses, but that has to be understood. And the receiving core, it's a work in progress. I mean, there have been changes. I see that there are guys that have to step it up, but I think it's unacceptable to be taking it out on other fans. I don't see
and
the
also the one
value
other
of that.
note, back in the 2018 Eastern Final, I just remember in my head another example in Ottawa. I don't know if you have heard about this, but one of the crew managers for equipment managers, excuse me, from the Tiger Cats got snowballed by a bunch of fans in Lansdowne, like the opposing fans in Ottawa. The Ottawa Red Blast fans in particular, when the Red
Wow.
Blast were running to score on the Tiger Cats in the 2018 Eastern Final, and I know the guy, and he is without a doubt one of the most sweethearted individuals in all of sports that I can remember.
Yeah.
Atlanta Associate, and he has his own TV show on Cable 14. It's called The Dylan Show, and this man does not have the right to be thrown at, and let alone be any acts of profanity against the man.
I know I've known Dylan for a long time. Like I haven't communicated with him in a while, but I Dylan's been a fixture of the Tiger Cats, and I would argue, if you look at any CFL team, any professional team for that matter,
Yeah.
The equipment staff people are the most dedicated people in the organization.
Yeah.
They do a thankless job that people recognize when they think about it. Just the logistical, just the logistics of moving a team week to week
Mhm.
from place to place, and also to just maintain the team during their practice schedule, during their pregame activities, and in game. It's unacceptable to attack any personnel, but particularly those people. I mean, it's despicable. But I think that's a rather bad thing to leave the
Mhm.
podcast on. So let's talk about something more positive.
Yeah.
But I just want to a shout out to Dylan if he gets to see this because I know how dedicated he is, not just to Hamilton but to the CFL, and no one deserves that kind of treatment. But what do you expect from the next couple of weeks? We have Labor Day, of course, coming up for the Terra Cats. Um, that big game against Toronto, of course. But do you have any upcoming games or stories that you're looking at?
Well, specifically with Hamilton, it's you mentioned about Labor Day. You got a winnable game next week against Edmonton.
Yes.
Let me check to see what the schedule after the Edmonton game, because I know we have a bye week this week.
Yeah.
So yeah, so next, I I think next week at some point is the I don't have the schedule with me, but I believe there's a Hamilton BC, there's the Edmonton game, and there's the BC
Right.
game on the road, and then Labor Day against Toronto. And if Toronto wins, the series is done, and pretty much first place is out of the
Yeah.
rearview mirror for the Cats. More than a rearview mirror than anything else, but uh, Hamilton can still like go in and even the series against Toronto, but it is a tough stretch because Toronto has played relatively well against Hamilton in the two games
Yeah.
so far. But that's a big game for potential Eastern Final implications if they
Yeah.
if they want to run down the run it down, run the gauntlet and win the East. But it could happen still because historically you look at the Ken Austin era. Um, yeah, we had teams that started like 1-4, 1-5, and we go on to win
Mm.
first place or host
Yeah.
a East final.
You
And
also have the specter,
yeah,
and I certainly do not. Um, I certainly don't see it happening. But if there is a crossover, and Hamilton is the crossover team, a Hamilton Toronto Grey Cup in Hamilton. We are going to the game in November,
yeah,
in case fans don't know. That would be a fantasy of mine. But I just don't see it because I think Winnipeg is definitely the class of the. It could be said they're playing on all cylinders. They're right up there with Toronto as the class of the league right now.
Mhm.
But I mean, it's you have to put a competitive you have to put a competitive chip on the table. And I don't know if Hamilton can beat them at the moment, but they definitely have to play better than they have to this
The
point.
defense has been more
Yep.
than respectable. They have been good. The problem
Yeah.
is it's just like the frequent 2 and outs by
Yep.
Hamilton, especially the last game against Montreal. There was like more than a dozen to announce, and especially down the second half when they scored only 4 points. Like
Yep.
You got to keep pounding the ball. Like Hamilton had Montreal even in the grasp, and they got walked on in the second half.
Well, stand back and carry the ball. And the thing is that, you know, I know Butler has that capacity, but the line play has not been that consistent, particularly to end games. Like you have to be able to assert yourself in the fourth quarter if you have a lead. You know, I don't expect first downs, you know, with 10 straight runs, but you have to make it easy, second and shorts and that, to convert and keep the ball, you know, moving. And Terracats haven't been able to do that. My concern is the play of the two tackles, Kemp and Sarter. I think that, you know, yes, they're young, they're inexperienced in terms of the league, but there have been plays this year where they're basically turnstiles.
Yeah.
And you know, if you have your quarterbacks getting banged up on a consistent basis, the injury to Bo Levi Mitchell should not have happened.
No.
That whole thing mystified me. But you know, we haven't talked about it to this point. But to me, I mean, when you're trying simply to down the ball, you know, it's just you have to have a better understanding of the situation, and not have your quarterback take a hit like that. So let's stop there. I think we covered a lot of ground tonight. Obviously, there's going to be more to happen in the CFL going forward as we approach Labor Day. But in particular, there are other stories in baseball that I'd like to cover. We have the upcoming NHL season. So there's going to be other things that we'll be talking about in future shows. But I'd like to thank you, Michael, for your time as always.
Thank you very much for having me.
And if you enjoyed today's show, you can like and subscribe to our podcast, and hit the bell as well if you want to be notified about future shows. But until next time, we'd like to thank you for your audience, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thank you.